and welcome to another edition of Real Talk, Real Stories. My name is Advita Patel, and I am one of the co-founders of the Asian Comms Network. Every week, we tune in live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram with a special guest who's part of our community to find out more about their career, their journey into comms, PR, and marketing, and also their thoughts on what's going on in the world right now. And this week, I am joined by the wonderful Angela Balakrishnan, who is one of our advisory board members and also the exec comms director at ICO. Hi, Ange, how are you doing?
Hi, Advita. I'm good, thanks. Thanks so much for having me today.
Brilliant. We're really looking forward to this conversation today. So if you're watching us live or watching us on replay, feel free to say hello in the comments and share where you're coming in from. We'll be going in and out of the comments as well if you've got any questions about anything that we are discussing today. So please do pop in and say a quick hello. That'll be great to see you. So Ange, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your role and your career and anything that you think people should know about you, especially those who don't know who you are?
Absolutely. So, as you said, my current role is the Executive Director for Comms and Public Affairs at the ICO, which is the Information Commissioner's Office. We are the UK's data protection regulator. Most people will probably know that by the acronym GDPR, but we essentially are here to help promote information rights and people's right to keep their data safe, and making sure that companies and organizations using data are using it responsibly in a way that can help sort of all the brilliant tech innovations that we see around us, while making sure that people's right to privacy is protected. I guess specifically my team try and sort of make sure that people are aware of who the ICO are, help them understand what data protection rights are all about, and more important than that, I guess, helping people to actually care about these rights, why they're important to them, and sort of act on them. So that's a bit about the current job. I would say my career, in summary, has been specialising in integrated communications. I really believe in the power of bringing sort of lots of different comms disciplines together to really create that social change and have meaningful impact. My career has largely been in the public sector. I worked in central government for a large part of it, as well as the third sector. And I originally started out as a journalist. I worked at a national newspaper and a few other titles before taking the leap into comms. And I would just say more broadly, I mean, obviously, I'm a massive advocate for representation, inclusivity in our industry, which is something I think we all agree needs to get better. I believe in defying expectations, especially expectations that others place upon you, and trying to push new boundaries. So that, in a summary, is who I am and what I stand for.
Oh, I love that. Honestly, you are, and I've said this to you before, but you are such an inspiration for folks who are looking to kind of progress in their career and see. You know, we've spoken, we met, I remember us meeting up in a coffee shop in Manchester Piccadilly Station, remember, I think it was about 18 months ago now, it's a while back. And we were talking about how we don't often see people like us in executive tables, right? And you sit on the exec team. And we had a chat about what this means and how we sometimes feel excluded when we don't see faces like ours around that table. And we know that comms, PR, marketing, journalism is not representative, right, of the audiences that we serve. So when you were kind of thinking about your career, so you started off in journalism, what was it that inspired you? And I've asked all like my previous guests this, like who was like your inspiration? What was your inspiration to get into journalism when we don't see many people like us? Well, I hate to give our age away here, Ange, but in our 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll go back a little bit to my origin story, because I think I always harbored a desire to be a journalist. I, as a kid, loved stories, loved writing stories, loved reading. And I think I might have even said to my teacher when I was like 7 years old, I'm gonna be a journalist. And then slightly embarrassing, but I don't know if anyone remembers the New Adventures of Superman. It was like a TV series. And featured Dean Cain as Superman and then Terry Hatcher as Lois Lane. And I loved the character of Lois Lane. I loved the idea of working at a newspaper, unearthing these stories, like cracking sort of big societal issues. So I think it was always there, but it always felt like a pipe dream. And I think especially when you come from like a South Asian community where there's a lot of focus on very traditional roles, like I didn't see people around me kind of pursuing that path. And it wasn't until university, and my last year of university, I did economics and history as my degree. And lots of my course mates were all kind of applying for jobs in the city. And I just sort of had this dawning realization, like I couldn't see myself going down that path. It just wasn't for me. And so I decided to take the leap and give journalism a go. So I left university and I did my postgrad in newspaper journalism to sort of get qualified, get accredited. I was lucky that I had the support of my family, which I know can sometimes be a challenge. I mean, they were probably a bit skeptical, a bit, it was the fear of the unknown, I suppose, and the kind of security of whether this path ahead would provide me with a career, especially because they didn't really understand it and they knew it was like highly competitive, probably very difficult if you didn't know people and you didn't see people who were like you working in that industry. But I think I just powered on, like this kind of belief that if I had the passion and I worked hard enough, I could do it. And that was really instilled in me from my parents, especially my dad. And Advita, you know that my dad sadly passed away this summer. But I think that's definitely like really come back to the fore of my mind, because he just, his mantra was like, work hard, have the passion, and that will carry you through. Now, I'm not sure that's always the case. And I think the reality can often be quite different. But I think when I was young and probably a lot more naive, that did really sort of put the fire in my belly and drive me forward. And so my first break was working at a national newspaper as a journalist on the economics desk. So the economics degree did come in handy. And then, from there, just sparked my interest in all things kind of media, news, current affairs, and communication.
Yeah, I think, the legacy that our parents leave is instilled in us, right? Having parents who are incredibly supportive, even if they don't get it, or don't understand it, is critical to our success. I know the privileges that we have in having parents who did have our back, even though they were a bit nervous for us, a bit apprehensive for us, can make a big difference. And your dad's legacy lives in on you, right? And in terms of what you've achieved and what you're currently achieving. I mean, we spoke about your incredible career today, but also the work that you do outside of your career to help others thrive, like the women in PR work that you're heavily involved in, and the difference that you're making there, helping women thrive in their career. Because we know that PR and comms also has a lot of women who disappear at a certain age and don't feel included when they get past a certain point. And the work you're doing with that community is quite powerful, and also with the ACN. So you're living and breathing everything that your parents instilled in you, and that's something I think that you can be really proud about, and and hopefully display that with your children and future generation who recognize, actually, yes, things are hard, and they're really hard right now, right? Even harder than I would say there have been people, with everything that we're facing right now in the UK specifically, and in the US, around immigration and migrants, and do we belong here, and stop taking our stuff away from us, and all those kind of rhetoric that we're hearing. It can be exhausting, but that kind of method our parents taught us to keep on going, keep on working hard, and keep on showing up for yourself gets us through the toughest times. And I think you have portrayed that incredibly well. And like I said to you, you are an inspiration in the work that you're doing, and continue to do. So well done is all I can say. And you should be so proud of yourself, because it isn't easy. And you know this, right? It isn't. And we speak about this in the ACN all the time, how hard it is right now for us to progress in our careers. So when you're all the kind of support that you had when you're growing up and in your career and stuff, was there anything in your, because you said you moved from journalism, working on the kind of economic side of journalism and reporting on that. What was that pinnacle moment for you then that helped you transition into communications and working for the public sector and public service? What was there like an epiphany, or did you just take a leap of faith, or was there some kind of pull that made you want to go to central government?
There was definitely a decision point, because, as I said, like, the passion was originally to be on the journalism side, to be writing the stories. I think after sort of several years doing that, I sort of saw that progression was going to be hard. And, the media sector has been massively impacted by changes to readership and advertising models and funding, and it's faced lots of cuts and constraints. But then also, just this kind of structures the way that sort of people can often be in roles for a very, very long time. It makes it very difficult to sort of carve a pathway ahead. And so, like, I had a sort of moment of evaluation of, like, what am I really enjoying about this career path? And it was less about seeing my byline in a paper, but actually being part of the national conversation, working on big stories that people were seeing in the news, like shaping how those stories were landing, and reacting to sort of real world events in real time. And so I think that kind of led me to think about, well, what's the other part of this profession that I can carve a career out in? And that's where I sort of discovered roles within communication. No surprises that I started off my comms career working in a press office. I think it's a very natural step when you've been working as a journalist. And I started off working as a charity, actually. I worked at Cancer Research UK, which was fascinating, just in terms of its voice and influence, both in the science community and research sectors, but also, as a public health voice, and progressing lots of the issues around cancer care and early detection and so on. And learned a lot, like, it was the early years of social media, learning about things like podcasting and the rise of digital. So it gave me some really good grounding. But I'd always harboured this kind of interest of working in the centre, in the cut and thrust of government. And so, from there, sort of deepened my comms career in central government. So worked for Department for Business, had a very long career at DFID, Department for International Development, which sadly no longer exists, but was like a massive passion of mine, because it really combined my interest in public sector and also the kind of development economics subject matter. Had some incredible experiences there. I worked through the Ebola crisis, going out to Sierra Leone and deploying there in the midst of a major disease outbreak, working on things like the Syria conflict and crisis, like migration, obviously very topical issue still, big sort of humanitarian crises, whether that's famines or earthquakes, and then spent a few years at the Foreign Office before moving on to the ICO, which is where I am now. But I think the golden thread has always been, like, telling stories, making kind of issues that can be quite complex. I think especially when you're working on big policy issues that feel very technical and complicated, trying to sort of find the relevance and connectivity for different audiences, and using comms as a way of really making that kind of public social impact, trying to influence behaviours, as well as perceptions and reputation.
Wow, what a breadth of experience and opportunities that you've had there. Any, as I listen to you kind of list out these incredible opportunities that you've participated in and grown in your career, have you got any advice for anybody who may be listening today who is feeling a bit lost and a bit stuck and can't see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of their progression? What have you got any great advice or top tips or tactics they could deploy to kind of get them out of this lull that they might be in? Because you have, just you sharing those experiences that you've had, like what can people do to get out of this lull that they might be in?
I think first recognizing that it's more common than it might appear, especially when you see sort of scrolling through your LinkedIn profile and everyone seems to be singing successes. I mean, for all the great things that I've just described, there's definitely been difficult moments and setbacks. So not everything is as it seems outwardly. Trying to keep the faith. I think that's something that I'm telling myself a lot at the moment, in the current climate and lots of things that we're experiencing. And I think it helps to like find that shared network, that community, which can help you keep the faith. You know, just even recently, like having lunch with someone that I was able to kind of talk about some of my fears and concerns with, and they were able to sort of share theirs. Like there's a lot to be kind of gained from that sharing and communication with other people who can just understand you and kind of empathize and play that back. So that's why, you know, I love the ACN. I've met so many great friends, people that I now call friends, who've been able to give me that. Likewise with Women in PR. So I think there's a lot about investing in your network. And I think it's hard to say when you're feeling this way, but, you know, the resilience piece that we spoke about earlier, you know, just that kind of ability to just keep going despite the setbacks. And I think that is something that my dad definitely instilled in me. It's not always easy, but trying to keep open to the opportunities. And I remember something early on in my career, like someone said to me, you know, it's only you that's really going to care about your own development. No one else will ever be as invested as you are. So, you know, knowing that you can control your destiny to some extent by taking grip of your development, your learning, being open to opportunities. I remember some of the things that I did early on. I would just say yes to anything, even if it was not particularly exciting, or even if it felt scary, because I just knew that through saying yes, I might open a door to something else that I wouldn't have come across or expected to do. And it's definitely like led me down paths that I don't think I would have anticipated.
It's so interesting because The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes.
Mm.
If you haven't read that book, if you are watching this, I highly recommend you read it or download the Audible, because it was A Year of Yes by. So Shonda Rhimes is a producer who's done things like Grey's Anatomy and Chicago Fire, I think, and things like that. And an incredible. Yeah. She did my favorite one. Oh my God, with the White House of completely. I had it in my head that it's completely gone.
Scandal.
Scandal. She did Scandal. Oh my God, I loved that. Olivia Pope. Oh,
that's it.
Yeah. Loved it. And it was because of Scandal I read, because I haven't seen Grey's Anatomy, but it's because of Scandal I read her book. And I was in crossroads in my career. I was considering quitting PR and comms and go and study something else. I think I was going to go and do like organizational psychology or something. And then I read her book, and her concept for an entire year was to say yes to opportunities, as long as there wasn't a financial burden or it wasn't anything ridiculous in terms of danger to her life. She said yes to every opportunity that came that way, based on a snarky comment by her sister in when they're having a conversation about her not taking risks or taking opportunities, and it transformed her life. And when I read that book, well, I actually listened to the Audible and then I bought the book. I did exactly what followed that pattern of just saying yes, and it completely, I can't even stress enough, similar to you, Ange, it completely transformed my life into where I am today. If I hadn't read that book and I hadn't taken a chance on myself, then there's no way I would be here talking to you or doing the work that I'm doing today. So if you are feeling a bit stuck, I completely relate to the yes, within reason. You know, you've got to look after your well-being and mental health, and don't burn out, obviously, with saying yes all the time, but being mindful about your own physical and mental health. But don't hold yourself back and wait for validation and permission, is what I would.
I think part of that is also like being comfortable with the fact that people might say no back to you, like the kind of the rejection point, right? I think that is sometimes what holds us back, that putting ourselves out there we will get rejected, and that's like a very natural human fear. But I think being comfortable that sometimes someone's saying no to you, you know, for me, I always think it's better to have asked, because if you don't ask, you don't get. Sometimes that will be met with a no, but I'd rather know rather than be left wondering, you know, what if I had put myself forward, what if I had said yes?
Yeah, and you will get more no's than yeses. That's for certain. I can tell you that, right? You will get, and when you've got a little bit of people pleasing in you, which I have, which I call myself a recovering people pleaser, I think I have to admit,
I'm not even recovering, I'm still there.
I think many underrepresented folks are, though, right? Because we've got this desire to belong and fit in and be needed and wanted. So you kind of adjust and adapt to kind of align with the majority feelings and values of that culture that you're part of. So we're all kind of discovering this. How do we move into recovering people-pleasing space? So, Ange, as I shared at the start of this conversation when we met up in Manchester Piccadilly, we had a chit-chat about representation at the top levels, in exec boards and C-suites. And we said there weren't many people like us in those positions. So you have to almost believe in yourself that you can be there to kind of allow, to break the mold and the pattern of behavior. So when you think about your career journey, which has been broad, when was the first time that you saw someone like you in leadership? And what impact did that have on you? Or have you, or has that been quite difficult for you?
Yeah, I think it has been quite difficult. I think when I started getting into more senior positions, there was that dawning realization of like, wow, there aren't many people that look like me. And I would get the comments of like, it's so brilliant to see like a female South Asian sitting at the leadership table, and that's nice to hear. But it's also like, why is that? And I don't want that to be the case. I want it to feel like, that is not the normal, or at least something that we are regularly seeing. So that kind of realization that you are kind of forging new pathways or breaking new ground definitely focuses your mind on the things that we need to sort of shift and change in this industry. And I'm really proud of belonging to ACN and Women in PR, but it's all about like driving tangible, meaningful action and change. I think as an industry, we're very good at talking about the problem or being sort of performative, but we need to actually shift the numbers, because that's kind of the thing that at the end of the day speaks volumes. It was just like, even looking beyond ethnicity representation, I saw a news story yesterday that I think the GSK CEO has stepped down or is departing, which leaves even fewer women leading FTSE 100 organizations. So we're actually kind of moving backwards in terms of like female representation, which just highlights the kind of scale of the work ahead. But in terms of when I saw people like acing it at senior level, I mean, gosh, Advita, meeting you that time, it's been such an inspiration to think that we have a remarkable, impressive South Asian woman leading one of our premier kind of professional bodies. And I know Fazana's coming in hot on your heels next year. Like that was a moment for me. That was really inspiring. So it's just like, I can do this. I can belong in these spaces. I'm not just here as like the exception. So I think that was a profound moment.
I think that, and thank you for that, Ange. That definitely means a lot, because for me, when I was deciding whether I wanted to step into the presidency role or apply for it, there was a bit of nervousness, because, like, to your point, the 75-year history of CIPR, there hadn't been an underrepresented person of color in presidency, right? And you have to, and for me, it was all about, I've been a volunteer for that institute for 14 years. And I knew that somebody had to break the pattern. And I have the privilege to an extent to break that pattern, because I do work for myself and I've got a little bit more flexibility than others may have in terms of committing to a role like that. But I truly believe in that when you see people like you do feel like you belong in that space. And I knew that as soon as if I was to get that role, then the pattern would break, I would hope. And as you said, Fazana is stepping into that role, and over time, I hope more and more people will see themselves in those positions and where they can see value being added, because people don't like to talk about the uncomfortable topics, right? You and I both know this. We both experienced where we're being asked to move on because it's too uncomfortable, or we're making a big deal about something, or many of my friends will often say, "Oh, blow over, don't worry, nothing to worry about." But it's easier said than done, right? Because we're living it every single day. We're living with the biases. We're living with looking both ways on a street to make sure that we're not, crossing paths with anyone that might tell us to go back home or whatever. And all of that plays a big part on how we show up in the work that we do. So when you said you get, acknowledged for being the first South Asian woman around this table, you don't want it, none of us really want it to define our identity, do we? Like, we want to be known for the skills that we're bringing rather than the ethnicity that we're bringing, or the gender or the age.
Yeah, it's interesting, this kind of concept of identity, because I think I've definitely had a tussle with it over the years. I'm sure, like many people within our community, you experience that kind of code switching or the need to sort of fit in. And so for a long part of my early career, I probably downplayed my Sri Lankanness because I just didn't want to make it a feature of how I showed up at work. And then you get to a point where you're like, this is what makes me me, and I'm really proud of my culture, and I'm really proud of my heritage, and I want to talk about it and showcase it more. But then, also, I'm not just like a female South Asian leader. I'm so many different things, and I think that's something that I really do believe in. Like, we all contain multitudes. We are all so many different things at once, and some of those things are completely contradictory. And so this idea of belonging and community, on the one hand, we seek solace in sort of people like us and people who have those shared experiences, but we are also many different things at the same time. And so this idea of like, what does it mean to belong, really? We belong in many ways to lots of different things, is something that kind of constantly goes through my head.
Love that. You're right. And when I went to India to speak at Praxis, the big PR conference I have there, it was so lovely to talk about comms, to talk about PR and talk about comms, and not have to talk about D&I in that way, or what's it like, right now, and just be known for the experience that you're bringing rather than the identity that they see you as. And I tried to explain this in an eloquent way, but I just couldn't. It's really difficult to describe unless you've been there and you've lived it, if you know what I mean. But it was just lovely to be asked about internal communications and employee experience and what you're doing here. And, there's none of that kind of, oh, what's it like to be the first woman of color doing this? It was none of that conversation, which is, I suppose it's something that we do have to come to terms with, living in a culture like ours in a dominant space. But to your point, we're a paradox, aren't we? we're complex people, and I just think we should be taken for what we value, we bring, and what we do. What is the one piece of advice you would give to someone that's watching today who feels like they don't belong? Like, what is that one piece of advice you would give them?
One piece of advice. Well, I would say two people whose voices ring in my head when I think about belonging. So someone called Dhruti Shah, she's a storyteller, a writer, she wrote a fabulous piece, I think it was in The Guardian a couple of years ago, all about the kind of concept of belonging. And it was, just based on the thing that I've just talked about, for years, trying to fit into like kind of social constructs or what we think belonging means, but actually this idea that we are lots of different things. I'm a mum, I'm a South Asian woman, I'm a comms professional, I like trashy TV shows, I'm a fitness fanatic. So what does belonging mean when there's so many different facets to ourselves? And I think kind of finding comfort and joy in the fact that we can belong in lots of different ways, and maybe like looking at the kind of concept of belonging slightly differently. And then the second person is Amy Keane, who I think you know as well. Amy runs a fantastic sort of training, learning and development company called Good Shout, which is all about helping women in particular find their voice. And Amy really embraces the weird, and I love that about her. And I think we all need to kind of get more comfortable with the weird, with the cringe, because that's just part of life. It's about part of like who we are as humans. And it kind of rejects this idea of belonging, because we all have our quirks. We all have things that are a bit strange about us. That's okay. So lean into your weirdness. That's what makes you unique.
Amy, Dhruti, I know Dhruti Shah and Amy Keane, and both of them are incredible women who speak up and share what they stand for. And I met Amy at an event actually, and we spoke about this unlikable woman narrative that's kind of thrown out there when somebody doesn't agree with the norm, right? So all of a sudden that you're this unlikable individual, but she embraces it. And she's like, I don't care. Like, she will always stand up and speak out about things that she believes in. So do follow Amy on LinkedIn, because she does share some incredible insight and really makes you think about your contribution, what you're doing as well. So great, 2 brilliant women doing fantastic things. Highly recommend you do follow them. Any final words, Ange, for anybody out there? So let's end it on a very high note in terms of what is the best piece of advice you've ever received in your career?
You're not alone. You know, we're in this together. There's so much solace to be found in shared experiences. So, you know, find your people, whether that's through a community or a network that exists. I think you do sort of reap what you sow. And so while it can be a bit scary putting yourself out there, find your people, because they will really help you get through whatever it is that's ahead.
Love it. The networks out there are incredibly helpful. So obviously we've got the Asian Comms Network, where we have an incredible community of people that you can reach out to and speak with. There's also the Black Comms Network. There's the People Like Us that goes on. Elizabeth Banuka's Pros work that she does as well. There's Socially Mobile that the Waddingtons host with, which is about socioeconomic and underrepresentation. There's so many brilliant networks and communities out there for people to connect with, and women in PR, another fantastic organizer, and global women as well. There's a global women in PR as well. So there's so many different networks. If you are thinking, where do I fit in? Where do I belong? Where can I go? Then please do pop a note in the comments, and we will share these resources with you as well. And of course, you're always welcome within the ACN community. We've got the wider membership, which is an open community, and then we have our circle membership if you're looking for a little bit more intimate relationships and conversations with people as well. So we'll put those details in the comments as well. And if people want to,
I always love like meeting people, having a chat, having a coffee, virtual or in real life. So hit me up on LinkedIn. We'll be happy to say hello.
Brilliant. And that's exactly what I'm asking. What's the best way that people can connect with you? So LinkedIn, and we'll put Angela's details as well in the comments. So please do reach out to her if you're wanting to have a chat. And going for a coffee or having a virtual conversation is such a powerful way to build connection. Thank you so much, Ange. That half an hour has flown. Absolutely. And thank you for joining us live. If you're watching us, I've seen that Ranjani and Sayali have been saying hello in the comments as well. So hello to you. And if you are watching this on replay, then please do share that you watched it and share your details as well, because we'd love to connect with you. And we'll next week, I think it's Shayoni next week, who's has a special guest. My mind is completely blank, but we'll share the details on our LinkedIn page. But it's Shay next week interviewing, because I will be in the US. Thank you so much, Ange, for this wonderful conversation, and we will see all of you next week. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Cheers, Advita.